Alrighty. So once we've used the scope, we're going to clean the scope, which is probably the most important part. If it's not cleaned appropriately, it won't work appropriately, and we find that lots of issues can occur. So it's quite the process. There's a lot of different things that we use. If you have questions and want to refer to anything in more detail, I made this binder a few years ago, so that's instructional. And for anyone that wants to learn more about scopes, we have this as well. Regarding cleaning it, you can, in theory, set the scope away and come back and really clean it later. But the most important part is to make sure that the enzymatic cleaner is run through it. For the enzymatic cleaner, we will just do one pump of it, and then we will fill the bowl the rest of the way with distilled water. And then suction that all the way through. You can then hang the scope up and come back and clean it later. The rest of it, we will use this gnarly chemical called, this one's Wavicide. It's glutaraldehyde, but there's a lot of different brands. It doesn't get diluted. Definitely if you are pregnant, do not handle that particular material or this particular chemical. You'll have to get somebody else to clean the scope for you. And always wear gloves, a mask, because it can cause a lot of irritation to your respiratory system, as well as goggles, because you definitely don't want it in your eyes. So we will just pour a little bit in the bottom of a blue bowl. I already have some gauzes in there, and then that gets followed with just regular old alcohol. You will start by, you want to make sure that you're hooked up to suction, which I will turn on. You will start by, you will dip into the Wavicide and run that through, run this brush through the instrument channel, which you'll see it'll go all the way through. There's two different size brushes. This is obviously the one that's meant for the gastroscope. The one for the bronchoscope is much smaller. You will not be able to get the gastroscope brush through the bronchoscope. You can see that. So just depending on the procedure that you perform, you may have to run this through more than 3 times. But the general rule is you want to alternate between the Wavicide and the alcohol 3 different times, just to make sure that the inside of the channels are clean. The next portion, you will take off the buttons, the suction button and then the insufflation button. These buttons are very, very different from one another, so there's really quite literally no chance you're going to put them in the wrong hole. And we'll soak those while we're wiping down the outside of the scope, which I'll usually start with, again, with the Wavicide, and then later on in the process, I'll transfer them over to the alcohol. Wiping down the scope, you just want to be really thorough. You want to make sure that you're getting into all of these little cracks and crevices. By all means, use Q-tips if need be, if it seems like it's really gnarly. And then you'll wipe down all the way to the end of the connection and all the way from the camera end all the way back up to the handle. And again, you'll do that alternating between the Wavicide and the alcohol. And then once it's done, we're gonna pressure check it one more time, which I can go over in case you have not viewed the previous video. So we have this connection. It lives in underneath the sink. And it just connects directly where the scope connects to the camera, to the computer. So once that'll be clamped on tightly, and I'm just gonna squeeze our air tester until the needle reaches the green. We do this before and after we scope, so that way that we know if something's happened somewhere in between in the procedure and if the instrument needs to be set off. So once that's done, we will hang the scope up. It needs to be hung up, connected to suction for an hour to make sure that it dries out on the inside. And that's it. The scope is very similar as far as cleaning it's concerned. It just uses a smaller brush, and there's just the one button, which you will treat exactly like you did the other buttons by alternating between the two. It will also need to be hung up to dry after the fact, and I would recommend if you're scoping something really gnarly like a fungus, I would actually suction the lid side and the alcohol through prior to hanging the to hanging the bronze. Outside of that, not really much difference.